Welcome to the IT Smart Guy podcast, a technology podcast aimed at the modern business owner. And here's your host, Tony Edwards. Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the IT Smart Guy podcast, the tech-based podcast for the modern business owner. I'm Tony, and in this episode, we'll talk about a few things that have been happening in the tech world of late. Things like Microsoft suffering from an outage earlier this week, LastPass being in the news yet again, and TikTok looking to implement screen limits. We'll then go on to the brain dump, where I talk about something that has come to light recently about younger generations and their relationships with tech. Finally, as always, at the end, I'll be sharing my tip of the episode. Let's jump straight in to the news. Let's look at what's happening in the news. So, in the news this time, earlier this week, Microsoft suffered from an outage. This outage was blocking Exchange Online customers worldwide from either accessing their mailboxes or from sending or receiving emails. This outage was denoted as EX522020. Microsoft first tweeted about the outage at around 4:56 p.m. GMT time. And what was happening was affected users were getting a recipient address rejected error, also known as a 550-541 error, when trying to either send or when trying to receive messages. Customers were reporting on both Twitter and Reddit that large volumes of emails being sent to Exchange mailboxes were just simply not reaching their recipients. Later that evening, at around 6:25, Microsoft put out a tweet that their telemetry indicates that the service had largely recovered, and they were continuing to investigate to determine what was the root cause and if additional action was required. They then went on to say just before 8 p.m. that it was in the process of routing Exchange Online traffic away from what appeared to have been an affected piece of infrastructure as a way of mitigating the issue so people could send and receive emails again. And then by just before 9 o'clock, Microsoft said in a Twitter post that the issue was resolved and they were able to reroute this traffic using alternative infrastructure, at least in the interim. So what did this mean for businesses? Essentially, it meant businesses were without email for a few hours, a crucial item. For UK-based businesses, for most it was the end of the day, and chances are people would just close their laptops and stop for the day. But in the US, the day had only just begun, meaning that chances are some business was lost. Now, cloud computing tools have sped up cloud adoption, and the pandemic pressed even harder on the accelerator for that. This does mean that these sorts of technical issues will pop up from time to time. Luckily for us, the likes of Microsoft have teams of people around the globe, meaning that these issues don't take forever to get resolved. But it makes it really hard for IT companies because we're there to support customers, and we can't do much with when Microsoft or something has an outage, other than monitor the situation. From Microsoft, it's time to talk about an old friend again. That's right. On Monday, it was announced that the same attacker as before had hacked an employee's home computer and got access to a decrypted LastPass vault that was only available to a small handful of developers. Now, the unknown threat actor was able to steal some valid credentials from a senior DevOps engineer and access contents of a LastPass data vault. Among other things, the vault gave access to a shared cloud storage environment that contained the encryption keys for customer vault backups stored in Amazon S3 buckets. Now, this was accomplished by targeting the DevOps engineer's home computer and exploiting a vulnerable third-party media software package, which enabled what's called remote code execution capability, and it allowed the threat actor to implant some malware which logged keystrokes. This meant the threat actor was able to capture the employee's master password as it was entered after the employee had authenticated with multi-factor authentication and gain access to the DevOps engineer's LastPass corporate vault. Now, the hacked engineer was only one of 4 LastPass employees with access to this vault. And once in possession of the decrypted vault, the threat actor exported the entries, including the decryption keys needed to access the AWS production backups, other cloud-based storage resources, and some critical database backups. Now, it's rumored that this backup data contained both unencrypted data, such as website URLs, as well as website usernames and passwords, secure notes, and form-filled data. Some of this did have an additional layer of encryption on it using 256-bit AES. Now, the threat actor behind these LastPass breaches that have been hugely resourceful, and the revelation that they successfully exploited a software vulnerability on the home computer of a senior DevOps employee further reinforces that. But what does all this mean for you? Put simply, if you're a LastPass user, do yourselves a favour and move away. This podcast's been going since October. This is the 3rd LastPass related issue since the podcast launched. So that's within less than 6 months. LastPass advise you to change your master passwords and all the passwords stored in your vault. Personally, I'd move to an alternative password manager and change all your passwords. Then delete everything from LastPass and close your account. Now, if you're not sure what password manager to use, I personally really like Keeper and 1Password and would happily recommend either to a business. If you're a home user or perhaps you're on a bit of a tighter budget, you could check out Bitwarden or KeyPass XC. Finally, a quick bit of news coming from the land of social media. TikTok have announced that they're going to be rolling out a 60-minute daily screen time limit for users under 18. Now, if young people reach their 60 minutes, they have to enter a passcode to be able to continue to use the service that day. Now, TikTok have said that they're rolling this out to try and help people. They want to help people stay in control of the amount that they use their devices. And this comes after a prompt from last year to encourage teens to manage their screen time. Screen time tools have seen an increase in use by over 230%. But if you ask me, it's not down to the teenager to set their screen limits. It's up to the parent. Screen time apps have been around for years. We use them. But more recently, these have been built into iOS and Android. And I hate to say it, but parents just need to have the bottle to set it up and say no to their children when they ask for more screen time. That's it for the news for now. Let's move on to the brain dump. Do you have an interesting tech story? Do you run a business? Are you a technology provider and want to come on the show? Just have a chat. You can do just that. All you need to do is go to the link in the show notes and apply. The application takes a couple of minutes, and who knows what it could lead to. More brand awareness, more social followers, increased revenue, or maybe just a platform for you to share. What have you got to lose? It's time for the brain dump. Today, I want to talk about something that kind of shocked me. I was helping my stepdaughter with some form filling for a new job, and I was completely flabbergasted at her level of knowledge with her computer. Now, she's had access to computers for the better part of a decade. yet she could barely send an email. To me, it's quite concerning that a girl of 18 can't use a computer, even basically, considering they've had a lot more access to them throughout school, even more so than I did back in the late 1990s. Now, don't get me wrong, the jobs she's had since leaving school haven't required her to use computers on a regular basis, but there should still be enough residual knowledge from her school days to be able to send an email or complete a form on Microsoft Word. When I asked her about it, she said that the Apple operating system was too difficult to use, despite her having access to my old Apple laptops for at least 8 years. And then when I suggested she get a Windows PC, she said she isn't a peasant. A peasant. Now, some of this was tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it made me open my eyes. When I was growing up, I didn't have Nike trainers or Levi jeans. I had what my parents could afford. I want the same with my kids, but peer pressure is, let's face it, at an all-time high because of social media. Teenage life seems to have become a constant popularity contest or a pissing contest where kids are trying to one-up their friends. I quite often hear, oh, everyone's doing it, or this person's got a new pair of trainers, so I need some. And with more and more young people having access to smartphones, the way we work is going to continue to evolve. The way we communicate. But as great as smartphones are, they're not computers. You can't do everything on a smartphone that you can do on a computer. Meaning that computers are going to have a space in our world for years to come. Meaning that our kids need to know the basics at the very least, because otherwise they're going to struggle in the adult world. Let's be brutally honest here. There are kids out there right now struggling with doing basic things, like I said, like filling out a form. And this is a plight of our own doing. Am I saying teenage kids need more screen time after just kind of saying they don't earlier in the episode? I suppose I kind of am. But I'm talking about having access to a different type of screen time. No phones, no social media, but using technology to learn. Learn how computers work, how to send emails, essentially basic digital skills. That way, they're going to be more equipped to handle the very basic office-based work when they hit the workplace. Because this will have an adverse effect on business. If 16 to 18-year-olds are struggling to use computers now, how are they going to do their jobs when they leave university? And what about kids in future generations? It's something to think about, isn't it? Our tip of the episode. So, before we get on to my tip of the episode, if you can cast your mind back to the last episode, we had Keith Blakemore Noble on. And among other things, he was talking about his new book, Anti-Manipulation, that launches on the 4th of March, the day after this episode comes out. As one of the crowdfunder supporters, I've been lucky enough to receive my copy before the launch date. It looks great, and I look forward to having a good read now that I have it. But on to the tip. I've been doing a lot of research, and as a company, we've just achieved our Cyber Essentials certification. And what I found interesting in doing this research is that there are a number of IT support companies out there in my local area claiming to have the certification. They have the mark on their website, but when you do a search for their company or their certificate, they're nowhere to be seen. Cyber Essentials is a government-backed framework and is supposed to give peace of mind that your defences will protect against the majority of common cyber attacks. If your IT company says they have Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, check their certificate number by doing a Google search. Just search for Cyber Essentials Certificate Search and choose the top option. You especially want to check this if they're offering cybersecurity services or, even worse, cybersecurity certification services. Because how can they certify you at Cyber Essentials level if they haven't got the certification themselves? With that being said, we've now reached the end of the episode. I've been Tony, the IT Smart Guy. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you found the episode insightful or informative, and I hope to see you or speak to you again in the next episode. If you've enjoyed this, or even if you haven't, please let us know by leaving a review or a comment on whatever platform you're using. Your comments are the only way I can get better at doing this. And as always, if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for listening to the IT Smart Guy podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'd love for you to like and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice.